Hey guys, this is the second part to my last video about like my painting process. So let's get right into it. I'm painting the background here. I'm doing a floral commission, and the person commissioning it wanted like a sort of purple bluish kind of background. So that's what I'm doing here. For the brushes, I mainly use that like wide angled brush to like block out a good portion of it. It was easier to do that with the tulips ones that's on the right side, just because there was like big empty space. But on the other two wood panels that I'm painting, there was a lot of like smaller spaces. So for that, I did use a smaller brush to fill in all the blank spaces. I ended up doing about, I want to say 2 to 3 coats of that purple paint. For the tulips, I did think it was just like 2 coats, just because it was a lot easier to jam pack a lot of paint with that wide angled brush. But with the smaller brush, I was working a lot slower and with a lot less paint to get a more precise paint square. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, for the other ones, I did do about 3 coats. And as you can see here, I just started off by sort of outlining the shapes with the smaller brush, and then where I could, I did fill it in with the angled brush. And I always like doing my first sort of coat of paint a little bit watered down. I feel like it just helps me glide the brush a little bit smoother. And in the first coat, I'm not looking necessarily for coverage. I'm looking to like block out shapes. I also just like using acrylic as a sort of watercolor consistency. Maybe that's just me. I know a couple other people that do it. But I just feel like in the end result is a lot smoother. I personally don't like seeing a lot of brush strokes. I don't mind necessarily the texture of the canvas or of the wood, but there's something about the brush strokes that I just can't get behind. Anyways, having a more watered down consistency of acrylic paint that I gradually build helps me keep that paint very, very flat. So this is when I started doing the second coat on one of them. I had already done the second coat on the tulips. I forgot to film that part. But yeah, the second coat goes on a lot easier once I have everything blocked off. And even then, when I did that, I'm mainly just using the angled brush to block off the very big portions. But I tried not to get too close to the actual border of the lines and just save that for the smaller brush. So again, doing the leaves was a very similar process to doing the background. I started off with a more watered down acrylic paint and just like blocking off the areas and doing my best to get very precise lines. And then after going in and doing that second coat, I did about 3 coats, I think, of the green, just because my yellow was a little bit transparent. So then on my second day of painting, I went in and started doing the highlights for the leaves. And I had originally mixed more of a yellowish green, but I ended up not liking that too much for the highlights. I felt like it was too big of a difference between the light green and the dark. So I did end up mixing it with a little bit of blue and just going over the areas that I had already done with that more like lime green. And this part did, in fact, take a while. For the tulips, it was relatively quick. But because I had so many overlapping lines and like very skinny lines that I had to do highlights on for this wood panel and the other wood panel with just the poppies on it, it did take me a lot longer. But it was fun in a way, very peaceful. And to do those like very skinny lines, I did like water down my paint a lot. Just because when my paint was too thick, like it just would not budge and then it would come out all shaky. It's very challenging finding that like fine line between too watered down but also like not too thick. Um, but yeah, that's what I was doing here. It was very intense, but also fun. And then I went in and painted the flowers once I was done with the leaves and the stems. Here I'm painting the California poppies specifically because they're more of an orange color, and the person who commissioned me also wanted California poppies. So again, like the background, like the leaves, I outlined it first, and then where I could, I did fill it in with that angled brush, but because some of these flowers were a little small, I did use just the very small brush to sort of fill it in. One thing I will say is I feel like I could have watered down the paint a little bit more at this stage, because I feel like it did end up not necessarily bumpy, but you could definitely see the brush strokes compared to the leaves, which I didn't like that much, but it was fine in the end. It's more of a like pet peeve kind of thing. For the flowers, their only request was to include California poppies, but they did want a second flower, and I ended up recommending tulips. I feel like, despite being very different flowers, I feel like they have kind of the same vibe in a way. I don't know if it's necessarily like the texture of the petal or just like the bright colors. I just thought tulips would be a good option and they agreed, so that's what I ended up doing. And for the tulips, I did more of a rosy pink kind of color. I don't know what you would call this shade of pink exactly, but it's my favorite shade. One thing I did not film was doing the highlights on the flowers. They were just a little too intense. I was having my face like 2 inches above the wood panel. It would just not be a good look for anyone. So once I was done painting the poppies, adding the highlights, I went in and did the tulips. And then once I was done with that, I finally got to the outlining stage. So to outline, I used the Micron pens. I started off with a 03, because the person commissioning me wanted black outlines, but we weren't quite sure how thick we were going to be able to do the lines. Not necessarily on the tulips, but on the poppies and the other wood panels, just because they had a little bit more of an intricate design, and we were kind of afraid that too thick of a line would sort of muddle all of that. So I started off with a 03, and once I did the 03 on all of them, I realized we could go a little bit thicker, so I ended up going with a 05 micron. And it does not feel like that big of a difference, but I swear it is. Um, I feel like you can see it here how much the 05 makes a difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I really love how it looked with the thicker lines, and so did the person commissioning it, which is very important. Once I was all done, I let it dry for a couple of days, and then I ended up varnishing it with a gloss varnish from Liquitex, but I did not take a video of that or pictures. So here is the matte finalized version, which isn't too different from the gloss. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Let me know if voiceovers are like a thing you guys like, or if I should just give up on that. Anyways, thank you for watching. Yeah, bye!